I want to spend a few minutes today and just walk you through what you do when you feel like you don't have enough faith. You don't have enough faith. In Matthew chapter 17 and verse 20, he says, "For verily I say unto you," this is Jesus, "if you have faith as the grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, remove hence to a different place, and it shall be removed, and nothing will be impossible to you." Now, in the years that I've had the privilege of being the founding pastor of this church, I've had numerous conversations where people have come to me and they've literally looked me in the eye and they said, "Pastor, I just don't have enough faith. I just don't have enough faith." And when they've said that, the conversations all go down a similar path. For many of them, they're dealing with health issues. And they're just saying, "I don't have enough faith. I don't have enough faith to get through this. I just don't." For other people, they're dealing with a job, a career, a business. And they're saying, "I just don't have enough faith. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to be able to navigate, how we're going to be able to get through this." Or, "My family, we've hit the wall and it just doesn't look like it's ever going to get better. It doesn't look like it's ever going to get different. It doesn't seem any possibility. I just don't have enough faith." Or, "What I'm facing is just too big. It's just too big. It's too much. I don't have enough faith." Well, the problem is that sometimes when we talk about faith, we tend to talk about faith in terms of, if you go back a few years for someone like me, when I was just young in faith, there was a man named Billy Graham. And when I would watch Billy Graham, it was like looking at the peak of what faith is supposed to be. Or maybe a Mother Teresa, a lady who just went someplace no one else would go and literally changed not only a locale, but eventually changed a whole thought pattern for the world. Or maybe it's someone you watch on TV and you can fill in the blank, but someone who's on TV frequently like a Joel Osteen, and you see them. And we tend to talk about that. But I want to talk about faith in different terms. I want to give it a twist. I want to talk about the single mom. You know, that single mom that's working 2 jobs. Her kids are going to start school this week and she's just struggling. She doesn't know if she's going to have the resources to be able to manage it. And let me say thank you to all of you that brought backpacks so that we could help kids that didn't have the resources and were unable to do things. Thank you to you. But that single mom that works 2 jobs, and she's going to get up early and get her kids up and get them to school, and then she's going to go to work, and then she's going to go to work again, and then she's going to come back and she's going to feed those kids, and that's going to be repeat day after day, week after week, month after month, as she tries to hold together some similitude of a family. I want to talk about faith like hers. Or I want to talk about the man who walked in here and maybe they're an alcoholic or they're being enticed with something in life that tends to get the best of them. And they're walking in and they always feel that they're on an uphill climb. "I'm not sure I can beat this. I'm not sure that I can master this. I'm not sure." Or the individual, and they walked in and I said, "Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 17 and verse 20. They don't know where Matthew 17 is. They don't know what verse 20 looks like. They don't have a clue. This is all new to them. Or the person who was diagnosed this week, and when they were diagnosed this week, it was a word that was used they thought would never be used to describe them. I want to talk about their faith. See, we tend to talk about faith when people are at their peak. But the truth of the matter is, most of us aren't at our peak. I want to talk about ordinary people and faith. See, one of the intriguing things is that when Jesus spoke about faith, he spoke about faith differently. In fact, he used a metaphor, and he referred to faith as a mustard seed. Now, I got to tell you something. When Jesus used the term a mustard seed, that sort of took me back a little bit because God knew that 2,000 years down the road, there would be people hearing a verse, if you have faith as a mustard seed. Now, I don't know about you, but I could have lived my whole life and never used that term mustard seed. There's no class I would have ever used it in. There's no business I would have ever used it in. There's no context that I would have. Why did Jesus choose a metaphor that was extreme for the day in which we lived? Why did he use something? I don't know about you. I've never run into a mustard seed tree. I just haven't. I've never seen physically a mustard seed. Never seen one. In fact, the only way I know what a mustard seed tree looks like and a mustard seed looks like is that I Googled them. And when I Googled them, you know what I found? A mustard seed tree is really a overlarge bush that's just hoping one day to become a tree. It doesn't look special at all. So I'm sitting here and saying, why? Now, if he would have said, if you have faith the seed of a watermelon, man, I think we could rock with that. That would make a little bit. The faith the seed of a tomato, we could roll with that. That would make sense to us. But a mustard seed? And I'm thinking to myself, why did he use that? And then I hit images on Google. And when I hit images on Google, I looked at a mustard seed. And really, if you put a watermelon seed on your finger, you're gonna see that. If you put a tomato seed, you're gonna see that. If you put a cantaloupe seed, you're gonna see that. But a mustard seed could get lost on your finger. I mean, literally, if that mustard seed was a boy going into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it would be the seed that would be most likely to be picked on. Because it is just puny. But then it hit me. That's the very reason Jesus used this. That he was hoping that 2,000 years later, that there would be a group of people that would begin to maybe look up what a mustard seed really looked like. And even though it doesn't have crossover appeal to our society today, and it's not known or seen, that Jesus was conveying a thought. In fact, there are 3 ideas Jesus was conveying when he said, I want you to have and understand if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. And the first thing is this. Jesus was saying to everyone in this room, your faith may seem small in comparison to your problem. Now, I need you to get that. Your faith may seem small in comparison to your problem. Your faith may seem small. Get the illustration. Jesus said, if you have this level of faith, the kind of faith that you can barely see in your finger, and you have that kind of faith, it can move mountains. Everyone can see a mountain, seed, mountain, seed, mountain, seed, mountain. And he's saying, your faith can look small in comparison to your problem. And see people who come to me and say, my faith's not big enough. They think that means they don't have faith. But what Jesus was saying is that's how everyone feels about their faith. Everybody feels that their faith is small in comparison to the problems. Their faith looks this, then there's these mountain of problems out there. They look so big, they look so great, they look so large, and you're looking small faith, big mountain, small faith, big mountain. Everyone feels that their faith is a mismatch to the problems that they're dealing with. So if you're here and you're saying, hey, I'm that single mom and I'm just struggling right now because I'm trying to believe God for my family and everything seems just so large, Jesus is saying that feeling that you feel is what faith will feel like. because you will feel like your faith is small compared to the problems you possess. You'll feel that your faith is small in comparison. And he says, and you're going to think that your faith can't make a difference. Well, what's the use in doing this, man? Seriously, praying about this, what's the use? This is a real problem, real mountain, real circumstance. What's the use? And what God's saying is that when you feel that, that's not a unique feeling to you. It is a feeling that everyone feels when it comes to their faith. Because in the 48 years that I've done this, I've never had anyone walk up to me and say, Pastor, I'm dealing with cancer. I want you to know I've got this. Nobody. Everybody's always felt it was small in comparison. So if you feel that way, that was the first thing Jesus said. Your faith may seem small and to comparison to your problems. But the second thing Jesus was saying is that God does big things with small faith. God does big things with small faith. Your faith may seem small, but don't forget, God does big things with small faith. God does big faith. God's not sitting up in heaven and saying, until you have big faith, I can't be God. God's looking at you and he's saying, I specialize in small faith. Do you realize in our society there's more $1 bills than $100 bills in circulation? Why? Because more people know what a $1 bill looks like than a $100 bill looks like. Why? There's more of it. There's more small than big. There's more small faith than there is big. But he says, that's all right. I'm a God who specializes in doing big things with small faith. Let me take you back to a time in Ginny and mine's life and walk you through some events that began to unfold for us. When this church was just starting, and we were way over on Custer and Parker at that particular time, and we were just beginning this church. We had started and we're beginning that first year. We already have our oldest daughter, Wendy, but now Ginny is pregnant with Casey. Now, as soon as we found out that Ginny was pregnant, we're praying. We're praying every day. This will be a healthy baby. Everything's going to go smoothly. There will not be any problems. There will not be any complications. They will do it. Now, I'm not saying that Ginny and I are perfect, but Ginny and I are really boring sinners. I mean, we're not out there doing, things that a lot. Some of you are professional sinners. We're really amateur sinners. I mean, some of you gone to the professional league with your sin, and I got it. But we were just, and every day we'd get up and we'd just do amateur kind of sin, but we were praying and believing God, this is going to be a perfectly healthy baby. This baby is going to be perfectly fine. We'd go to the doctor. Ginny would eat right and everything and do everything perfect. Anything they said to do, we were doing it. So we go through this whole pregnancy. There's nothing that would indicate any problems, any difficulties at all, until one day Ginny gets up, and when Ginny gets up, she says, sweetheart, I think I need to go see the doctor. Now, just a rule for some of you young guys who've yet to be married to a pregnant lady, never argue with a pregnant lady. There's no future in it. In fact, there's death in it if you do argue with them, but there's no future in arguing. And so I said, sweetheart, you want to go to the doctor? We're going to the doctor. So we go to the doctor. She's just feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But when it's about time to have the baby, sometimes they think you're just being a little bit queasy. And that was the way they were approaching Ginny. And so you don't see the doctor, you see the nurse. Well, the nurse is just quizzing her. How's everything going and everything? You could see that she was just sort of entertaining the thought pattern of, hey, you're just getting a little bit nervous as everything. And she says, well, let me listen to the baby. And I literally watch as she puts the stethoscope on Ginny's stomach. And then all of a sudden I see her face go blank. And she catches herself and she starts smiling. She says, hey, I'm gonna go get the doctor. Here's when you know you're in trouble. Nurses are trained to do everything to stop you from having to see the doctor. And so when they want to go get the doctor, this will be a sign to you. And so in a few minutes, the doctor's coming in. He's just sort of smiling and everything. And he listens. And all of a sudden, his faith goes down. He puts down a stethoscope and he says, Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, we've got to take you to the hospital right now. And I said, hey, I'm just curious, why? And he says, well, we can't hear the baby's heartbeat. I said, can't hear the baby's heartbeat. He says, no, it's not, usual, but, we're just going to put a fetal monitor inside, which means the baby's going to be born today. But when the babies, sometimes their hearts just act up a little bit. And so we go across the street. They put the fetal monitor in. They could hear the heartbeat. He lets me hear the heartbeat. Jenny hear good news. He just says the baby's coming today because we had to put the fetal monitor. And so the baby's going to come. Well, that's all great. There was a man in our church back then, and he happened to hear that we were at the hospital at that particular moment, and he had come up, and I said, Jenny, can I just step out and I'll pray with him for about 3 minutes, and then I'll come back in. She said, sure, because everything's fine. I step out for 3 minutes. When I come back in, there's no Jenny, there's no nurses, there's no dog. I'm talking about in a room. I'm talking about on the whole floor. I mean, it's rapture moment here. Everyone's gone and I've been left. Bad news when you are the pastor. And so there's nobody, and then all of a sudden I see a doctor running. Second thing I've learned is, one, you don't want the nurse going to get the doctor. Secondly, you never want to see a doctor in a hurry. See, the best news that you're going to live is when a doctor doesn't immediately rush into your room. That means you're not the problem. So everyone says, I can't believe I'm having to wait on the doctor. That means you're living. This will be a sign to you. But the doctor's sitting there and he's running. He says, there's the dad. Tell him to sit down right there. Well, sit down right there was a wheelchair. It's the only time I've ever been in a wheelchair. It's the only time I'm planning on being in a wheelchair. So I sit in the wheelchair. Literally, I'm on this side. The emergency operating room's on that side. He says, we got to get the baby out. I said, why? And they said, the baby's heart's crashed. And so they do the emergency C-section, which there's no subtlety to it. And they get the baby out, and I hear Casey cry for the first time. Wasn't the last time, but for the first time. And I hear her begin to cry. He says, go tell that father that he's got a healthy baby girl. I'm so happy, not what we prayed for. We prayed for smooth. We prayed for uncomplicated. We prayed for no challenge. We prayed for no difficulty in everything. This has been a little bit too much fun for us. We're believing God. We're not, going out there and doing stupid things in life. We're just believing God. And now we've had an emergency C-section. The baby's heart's crashed and everything, but the baby's fine. All that, Jenny wakes up, she gets to spend some time with Casey, but we had never planned on this day. And so Wendy's at a friend's. I've got to go get Wendy. I've got to feed her, put her to bed, get her ready. And I do all that. And the next morning, early, I get a call and Jenny's crying. And she says, sweetheart, you got to get here. And I said, it's everything. She said, you just got to get here. So I immediately find someone to take care of Wendy. I go and I run and I get to the hospital and the doctor says, your daughter has a major heart problem. You need to take her to a pediatric cardiologist. Well, I don't know about you. I didn't have any of those on speed dial. And so I immediately look up, we immediately schedule an appointment, and I can remember to this day walking into this office, and there's this cardiologist who specializes in kids, and I remember him taking Casey, holding this little bundle, listening to her heart for 15 seconds. He puts down his stethoscope, and he looks, and he says, she has a major, major heart problem. Well, I'm a fixer. That's the nature of who I am. And I said, well, what do we do? He says, I need to run one test. He runs the test. He said, it's exactly what I thought. It's this, it's this, it's this. I said, well, what's the fix? Well, she has to have open heart surgery. Now, this was 41 years ago because Casey's old now. And be sure and tell her that. But she's old now. And so but today they could do it different. But says she has to have open heart surgery. And we said, fine, when are we going to schedule it? He said, when she's 1 year old. He said, is there a backlog? I said, we can't do the surgery till she's 1 year old. Her heart's not big enough. I said, she has a heart problem and you can't do the surgery till. And I can remember Jenny to this day asking the question, well, what do we do to get her to 1 year old? And I can remember the doctor putting his stethoscope and going, I can't tell you. Jenny then proceeded to ask these questions. Well, do we stop her from crying? If she cries, could she die? He said she could be crying and die, but said she could be totally quiet and die. Well, do we stop her from moving? Well, she could be moving and die, but she could be totally still and die. And Jenny's looking for any mom answer to what can we do for a year? And he says, all I can tell you is until she's 1 year old, we can't do the surgery. So for 1 year, we're gonna walk by Casey's room, and every time we don't see her moving, the unspoken thing in Jenny's head and mine is, she's dead. Every time we looked in her room and we couldn't see her little chest go up like that, she's dead. Stress was so profound, so profound. I would get up in the middle of the night. It would be literally just keeping me awake, and I would put Casey in a stroller, and I would walk around the block because I knew I had to get this girl to 1 year. And I'm praying, Casey, you've got to fight, you've got to fight, you've got to fight. And of all the prayers I've ever prayed, that's the one that God's answered the most, because Casey will fight with everyone over everything. But now she's Jesse's fight. But I prayed, you got to fight. Don't give up. Don't get up. So I'm praying over this little bitty body that it wouldn't quit. It wouldn't quit. It wouldn't quit. So all these unspoken fears are there. We're going to wake up. She's going to be gone. She's not moving her chest. She's gone. She's not making a sound. She's gone. She's crying too loud. She's going to die. For a year, we're going to live with that. Never going to say anything because we're Christians. We're believing God. We're believing God. And so in the middle of that, we finally get to 1 year. I can remember going to each one of the doctors that are going to be involved in the surgery, because this is going to be open heart surgery. You know, today they have other options, but this is going to be open heart back then. And I can remember going to the anesthesiologist. I can remember going to the bypass doctor. I can remember going to the surgeon. I can remember going to the recovery doctor. And I said, what are the best? And I went to 5 doctors, and they gave me the best expectations of what they thought. And I remember that Jenny and I went, we still have that prayer. We have it in a file where we wrote a prayer based on those best that they said. But when they wrote those best, we said, but God, you do exceedingly abundantly above all. And we prayed that prayer. Now, when we prayed that prayer, what we were told the best is that Casey would have another surgery when she's probably 5 or 6. She'd have another one when she's probably, 12 or 13, have another one when she's 20. Another one mid, and that her life expectancy would be 30 years of age. That was the best. That was the best that they said. She'll live to about 30. She's now like 41, 42. I get confused with Casey because she celebrates her birthday where she has a half birthday and then a birthday, and then she milks them for 6 months. It's a new way of doing birthdays, so it's like an eternal birthday. But Casey's never had to have a surgery again since that moment. And she's blown past that 30-year mark and is blowing past every other mark. But see, when I was out there in the middle of the night walking with her praying, I didn't feel like I had great faith. Now I want to jump ahead a couple of years. A couple of years later, Jenny and I have our oldest daughter, Wendy. She's adopted. Casey's ours biologically. And then I wanted a son because I got tired of shopping at Toys R Us, old days when there were some. Toys R Us and only shopping in the girls section. I wanted to shop where I got to play with the toys too. And so, literally, we adopt Cody. And a part of adopting Cody was that I wanted an athlete in the family. And look at the genetic pool right up here. Does anything speak of athlete right up here? I mean, does anything really just say, there goes an athlete kind of thing? I mean, one day you look in the mirror and you say, not happening. It's just not happening. And so as a result of that, I'm going through this, and as I'm going through this, we get a chance to adopt Cody. Now, Cody's everything, you know. He's a great athlete. He's just tremendous and just fantastic. But I've already been through every day of wondering if my kid was literally dead. So we're at the hospital when Cody's born, and I talked to 3 doctors. I said, I want you to check his heart. How's his heart? Perfect. Another doctor, because I didn't trust one doctor. How's his heart? Perfect. 3rd doctor. How's his heart? Perfect. Because I've already done my time. And so we adopt Cody, we take him home. When we take him home, everything's fine. And I'm sitting in the office building that we own over at Parker and Preston back in the day. Our Parker and Custer. And I'm over there and I get a call from Jenny, and Jenny's taking Cody in for his 6th week shots. And she's crying. She says, Gerald, you got to get over here. I said, just give the kid the shots. She said, no, I need you to get over here. So I rush over there. The doctor looks at me and he says, Cody has a major heart problem. He said, you need to take him to a pediatric cardiologist. This time I have one on speed dial. So we go in, same doctor. He listens to Cody's heart for no more than 15 seconds because they can tell, you know, the loudness of the chambers, the gurgling and all of that. They can hear everything. And he says, puts it down. He says, Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, I can't believe this. He said, the mathematical odds in medicine of you having one child is so high. But then to adopt a child and to have this again, he said, you can't even give the mathematical odds. I said, well, maybe I should have played the lottery. But we're at it again. Now, I'm not like you. I'm not always a nice Christian. So I walk out of that office and I'm mad at God. I'm mad. God, why? And I know you've never been mad at God over your life. But I'm just mad. I'm giving God what for? God, why? What's going on? Why? And God stops me and he says this to me. He says, if there was a little boy that had a heart problem, what better family to put him in than a home that already knows how to believe for a heart? So we're going to have that same journey again. Now here's what I want you to know. There was never a moment in that journey that I felt like my faith was big enough. But I always knew my God was great enough. See, faith isn't about the size of your faith. It's about the size of your God. It's not whether you have great it's whether he's great. And too many people are trying to have perfect faith instead of saying, I've got a perfect God. So in your life, you get to decide. God does big things with small faith. God does big things with small faith. Never let the size of your faith, I'm just not sure I can believe. That's all right. Believe what you can and believe that there's a great God. So I prayed earlier, there's some of you, this is just church to you. You've done your religious thing. Good for you. You came in, you sang a few songs, and right now in your life, everything's great. There's other people that are here and everything's not great. Their back's up against the wall. But when your back's up against the wall, it's not about your ability to do. It's about that you have a God that can do anything. And so Jesus, when he used this metaphor, he was intentional. He says, mountains seem big in comparison to a mustard seed. Your faith is always going to seem small. But God does big things with small faith. But then God says, just remember, it's not the size of your faith. It's the size of your God. Because I never felt I had big faith. I've always known that I had a big God. Put your faith there, not here. Put your faith in him, not in you. Oh, well, I just can't. It's all right, he can't. Well, I'm not sure. He is. Well, I can't. He can't. Well, I don't. He will. Understand the magnitude of your faith.